What would you do if a millionaire offered you a fortune to change your life forever, only to reveal a twist that shook his world? Before we dive into this gripping tale, drop a like and let us know in the comments the city you're tuning in from. Let's see where our story reaches. Enjoy the journey, everyone. James Carter was a 42-year-old man who had everything: money, power, and status. But that night, he realized that despite all the luxury around him, there was one thing his money hadn't bought: an heir. He needed a child, but James didn't want a family in the traditional sense. He had tried twice, and both marriages ended in failure and disappointment. He thought love was an illusion, something that only brought problems. But a child was different. It was an investment, a continuation of everything he had built. And now, he was determined not to seek a relationship for this. He needed a clear agreement without emotional entanglements, just a contract. He knew that with his resources, he could find someone willing to carry the pregnancy without questions or emotional ties. For James, this was a transaction, and like all his transactions, he would have total control. Now, he just needed to find someone who would accept the deal. The next morning, James Carter drove his sports car through the city streets. His mind, however, was focused on finding someone who would accept the contract. And while stopped at a light on a busy urban road, something caught his attention. On the corner of the sidewalk, a young woman sat on the ground, drawing on a piece of dirty paper. She had messy brown hair falling over her face, and her blue eyes shone despite her tired appearance. She seemed invisible to others, but something about her caught James's eye. He tried to ignore her, but when the light turned green, he looked again and thought, "Who draws on the sidewalk as if nothing else exists?" Annoyed with himself, he sped away, leaving her behind. But a few blocks away, something bothered him. He stopped in a parking lot and sat there, staring at the steering wheel. When an idea came to him, "This is ridiculous," he said to himself, but his instinct pushed him back. Reluctantly, he turned the car around and went back to where he had seen her. There she was, just the same, now leaning the paper against the wall. He pulled up to the curb and rolled down the window, his tone direct and cold. "Hey, you, come here." The young woman looked at him with suspicion, her eyes narrowed, evaluating the well-dressed man in the sports car. She hesitated. "I'm not asking. Come on, I don't have all day," he insisted, not changing his tone. Slowly and reluctantly, she approached. When she finally stood next to the car, her thinness and the wear of her appearance were even more evident. Despite this, there was something in her posture, in the way she looked at him. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low but firm. James studied her for a moment before responding. "Get in. I'll take you somewhere we can talk." She laughed dryly. "I'm not one of those, if that's what you're thinking." He frowned, clearly irritated by the assumption. "Don't be absurd. I don't have time for that. I just want to talk. Now get in the car, or you can keep living on that sidewalk." The hesitation was still there, but something in his authoritative tone left her no room for argument. Finally, she opened the door and got in. The silence between them in the car was heavy, but James didn't seem to mind. He drove to a quiet cafe away from the city noise and parked. "What's your name?" he asked as they sat at a table in the corner. "Layla Parker." "But why does it matter?" she retorted, keeping a suspicious look. "Because I need to know who I'm dealing with. Tell me, Layla, why do you sit on the sidewalk drawing as if nothing else matters?" She shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "What else is there to do? I have nowhere to go. I lost everything, but that's none of your business." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Right. I'll get straight to the point. I want to make you an offer, something that can change your life." Her eyes narrowed. "And what would that be?" "I want you to have a child for me." Layla blinked, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "You're joking, right?" No, it's a serious offer. I'll cover all your expenses, give you full support during the pregnancy, and in the end, you'll get an amount that will ensure you never have to worry about money again." She let out a nervous laugh, crossing her arms. "This is a joke, right? What kind of man makes such an offer to a stranger? The kind of man who knows what he wants and doesn't waste time. I don't want a relationship, Layla. I don't want emotional drama. Just a child. Simple as that." Layla stared at James as if he had lost his mind. His words echoed in her mind. "I want you to have my child." As much as she wanted to dismiss his proposal as absurd, something in James's gaze told her he was absolutely serious. His cold logic hit her hard, leaving her torn between her dignity and the harsh reality of her life. "This is madness." Layla finally broke the silence. No woman in her right mind would agree to something like this. James didn't look away, maintaining the calculated posture that came so naturally to him. "No woman in your position would refuse," he replied bluntly. "I'm offering you a way out, comfort, stability, and a new life, in exchange for something you already have: the ability to bear a child." Layla crossed her arms, trying to maintain a facade of resistance. But deep down, she knew he was right. She was in a situation where every day was a struggle to survive. Even so, the idea of giving up something so personal for money made her stomach churn. "And then what?" she asked, her voice heavy with skepticism. "What happens after the baby is born?" James relaxed slightly in his chair, as if he had anticipated the question. "After the baby is born, you'll receive a substantial sum to start your life over. No strings attached. You'll be free to do whatever you want. No strings attached." She let out a humorless laugh. "And how do I know you won't change your mind and drag me into court later?" He studied her carefully before answering. "Layla, I'm a businessman. I don't enter into agreements without ensuring all parties benefit. You'll have a legally binding contract. Neither of us will be able to change the terms afterward. Now, if you're hooked already, smash that like button and tell us in the comments, what would you do in Layla's shoes?" Layla fell silent, absorbing his words. The promise of security, even if temporary, was tempting. She had nothing now, not even a place to sleep that night, but she also knew she was on the verge of making a life-altering decision. "And what if I say no?" she challenged, leaning slightly forward. James gave a faint smile. "Then you go back to the streets. You keep scraping by, facing the cold and the hunger. The choice is yours." His words landed like a blow. She wanted to hate him for being so blunt, but she hated even more the truth in them. He had backed her into a corner, and she knew it, but there was one more thing she needed to ask. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "A man like you, with all your money, why not adopt a child or find one of those wealthy women who love showing off their perfect kids?" James took a deep breath before answering, his tone more serious than before. "Because I want something that's mine, an heir of my own blood. And because adopting or getting involved with someone in my social circle brings complications I'm not willing to deal with. I want control, Layla. Nothing more, nothing less." The coldness in his words made her look away, unsettled. She knew he was being honest, which only made her feel more vulnerable. "I need time to think," she said finally, trying to regain some control over the situation. James nodded, as if he had expected this response. "You have 24 hours. After that, don't bother contacting me." He stood up and walked toward the door without another word. Layla watched as he disappeared, feeling as though she was being pulled into a whirlwind she might never escape. Walking through the streets, Layla's thoughts raced. James's words echoed in her mind. Comfort, stability, a new life. She knew all too well what it meant to have nothing. The biting cold of the night stung her skin, a reminder that tomorrow would bring the same struggles: the fight for food, the constant fear, and the humiliation of being invisible to the world. She sat on a park bench, staring at the overcast sky. Her mother used to say that opportunities only knock once, and it's up to you to decide whether to seize them or let them slip away. But at what cost, she wondered. Having a child, even as part of a deal, was a monumental decision. But what if it was her only chance to escape the endless cycle of misery? Meanwhile, James sat in his living room, reviewing a contract his lawyers had meticulously prepared. He hated waiting, but he knew Layla didn't have many options. Regardless, he had already calculated the risks. If she declined, he'd move on to someone else. Simple as that. The sound of the intercom interrupted his thoughts. He picked up, hearing his receptionist's voice inform him that Layla had arrived. "Send her up," he replied, his tone neutral. Minutes later, the door opened, and Layla walked in. Her eyes were tired, but determined. "I accept," she said bluntly, before James could say anything. He stood up, observing her carefully. There was no hesitation in her expression, just a firm decision. "Great, let's make this official." He motioned for her to sit while he picked up the contract from the table. Layla looked at the document, reading the terms carefully. The conditions were clear. She would be taken care of throughout the pregnancy with all her expenses paid, and in the end, she would receive a significant amount to restart her life. In return, she would give up any rights to the child. "This seems final," she murmured as she read. "That's exactly what I want," James replied, "and I hope it's what you want too." Layla took a deep breath and, after a moment of hesitation, picked up the pen. With a quick motion, she signed her name, sealing the agreement that would change their lives forever. The signing of the contract sealed more than just a deal. It marked a new phase in Layla Parker's life. That same day, she was escorted by Stephanie, James's assistant, to a black car waiting at the building's entrance. As she looked out the car window, the city, which had once felt overwhelming, now seemed to offer something different, a chance to start over. Layla didn't speak much during the ride to James's mansion, but Stephanie tried to break the silence. "You'll like the place. It's quiet, spacious, and, most importantly, comfortable." The friendly tone contrasted with the cold environment of the contract she had just signed. Layla just nodded, still processing everything that had happened in the past few hours. When the car finally arrived at the mansion, her eyes widened. The monumental iron gate opened, revealing a property surrounded by impeccably maintained gardens. At the center was the mansion, an imposing marble and glass structure that seemed as cold and calculating as the man who owned it. Stephanie led her inside, and Layla barely had time to take in the extravagant details. Crystal chandeliers, wide marble staircases, and furniture that looked like it came straight out of a design magazine made her uncomfortable. This wasn't her world, but for now, it would be her new reality. "I'll show you to your room," Stephanie said with a smile. "It's one of the best suites in the house." Layla followed in silence. Upon entering the room, she was greeted by a huge bed with linen sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a bathroom larger than any apartment she had ever lived in. "If you need anything, just call me. We're here to take care of you," Stephanie added before leaving her alone. Layla sat on the edge of the bed, running her hands over the soft fabric of the sheets. It was strange. Until yesterday, she had been sleeping on cold sidewalks, and now she was surrounded by luxury. But as comfortable as it was, there was still something heavy in the air. She knew she wasn't a guest. She was part of a business deal. In the days that followed, Layla tried to adjust to the new routine. Meals were served promptly, and a team of doctors was hired to conduct initial exams. As expected, James kept his distance. He was focused on work, rarely appearing around the house except to check the reports Stephanie gave him on Layla's progress. On one of those rare occasions, they crossed paths in the hallway. Layla was leaving a medical appointment when she saw James walking toward her, with his usual impeccable posture and serious look. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone more out of obligation than concern. Layla hesitated before answering. Everything is as expected, I guess. He nodded, not deepening the conversation. However, before walking away, he gave her one last look. If you need anything, ask Stephanie. I want you to be well. She didn't know what to make of that comment. Was it genuine kindness, or just a way to ensure the agreement went smoothly? Either way, that brief encounter lingered in her mind. Although she was being treated like a queen, Layla couldn't ignore the dilemmas that began to arise within her. During a silent night, she walked to the balcony of her room and looked at the vast garden illuminated by the moonlight. Everything was so calm, so far from the reality she knew. Am I doing the right thing? She thought, hugging herself against the cold wind. The idea of carrying a child and then giving it away seemed increasingly complex, and although the contract made it clear she would have no rights to the child, she didn't know how she would handle it emotionally. Enjoying Layla's journey so far? Hit like and share your thoughts below. How do you think she'll handle what's coming next? Meanwhile, James watched everything from a distance. He knew Layla was resilient, but he also recognized that she carried significant emotional weight. Despite his cold demeanor, he felt a faint twinge of curiosity about her. Who was this woman who had accepted such an unusual proposal, and why couldn't he completely shake the feeling that maybe she was more than just part of a plan? One evening, Layla was in the living room, browsing through a book from the shelf. She wasn't a fan of classic literature, but there was something comforting about the quiet of the house and the scent of old books. James walked in, surprising her. He seemed distracted, holding a folder of documents in his hand. I didn't expect to find you here, he said, stopping in the middle of the room. I didn't expect you to talk to me, she replied with a sarcastic smile. He frowned, but didn't respond right away. Instead, he placed the folder on the table and sat down in a nearby armchair. Are you settling in? He asked, crossing his arms. I think so, she answered hesitantly. But it still feels strange. It doesn't feel real. James leaned forward slightly. It doesn't have to feel strange. This is a contract, Layla. An agreement. I assure you everything will be carried out exactly as planned. That's what you do, isn't it? She said with a hint of defiance. Plan everything, calculate everything, leave no room for mistakes. He looked at her closely, as if deciding whether the conversation was worth continuing. That's how I've built everything I have. Planning prevents failure, he finally replied. Layla gave a short laugh, shaking her head. Sometimes failure is inevitable. You can plan everything, but you can't control how you feel, James. Her words hit him like a blow. He leaned back in the chair without replying. Layla noticed his reaction, but didn't push further. She simply picked up the book from the shelf and headed to her room, leaving James alone, deep in thought. The days went by, and Layla Parker began adjusting to life in James Carter's mansion. While the environment was grand and comfortable, she couldn't shake the feeling of not belonging. Every expensive piece of furniture, every decorative object seemed to scream that this wasn't her place. Still, she followed the routine. Frequent medical appointments, meals prepared by chefs. Despite the comfort, an emotional emptiness lingered. At night, alone in her room, she thought about what she had left behind. Not that it was much, but it was the only life she had known. Now, everything felt out of control. What would it be like to carry a child and then hand it over? She tried to push those thoughts away, but they haunted her, especially in the stillness of the night. While Layla grappled with her internal conflicts, James watched her from a distance. He maintained a reserved demeanor, but found himself curious. Even amidst his commitments and meetings, he often caught himself thinking about her. It wasn't romantic or emotional, at least not yet, but a curiosity he couldn't quite explain. One afternoon, returning home after a long day of meetings, James found Layla in the garden. She was sitting on a bench, her face turned toward the sky. The scene contrasted with the tough image he had of her. For a moment, he hesitated to approach, but eventually walked over to her. "Enjoying the garden?" he asked in his firm, direct tone. Layla turned, slightly surprised, but quickly responded, "It's nice. Definitely better than the streets." He sat beside her, keeping some distance. There was something disarming about Layla's honesty. "Are you settling in?" he asked. Layla shrugged, looking at the flowers in front of her. "It still feels strange, like I'm living someone else's life." James remained silent for a moment before replying, "It's all part of the agreement. I want you to have everything you need so things go as planned." "As planned," she echoed with a hint of irony. "Do you always live like this? Planning every second of your life?" James looked at her, surprised by the question. He was used to people who simply agreed with him, who never challenged him. "Planning is what keeps everything running," he said firmly. "Without it, everything falls apart." Layla gave a faint smile, shaking her head. "I don't think everything can be controlled. Sometimes things just happen, whether you want them to or not." Her words unsettled him more than he expected. He stood up abruptly, ending the conversation. "If you need anything, let Stephanie know," he said before heading back inside the house. A few days later, James decided to accompany Layla to one of her medical appointments. He justified his presence by saying he wanted to ensure everything was going well. But deep down, he felt a growing responsibility for the situation. Layla showed no surprise, but was inwardly intrigued by his decision. At the doctor's office, the usual examinations were conducted, and for the first time, they heard the baby's heartbeat. Layla felt a wave of unexpected emotion. Her eyes filled with tears, but she tried to hide it. James, on the other hand, remained still. His expression was hard to read, but something in his gaze had changed. It was as if that simple sound had touched something inside him that he wasn't prepared to face. "Everything looks perfect," said the doctor, smiling. "You can start thinking about what you want to do next, like prenatal care and the next steps." Layla nodded, but James remained silent. On the way back to the mansion, the silence in the car was heavy. James was visibly thoughtful, and Layla couldn't find the right words to fill the space between them. When they finally arrived, he opened the door for her, a simple gesture that surprised her. "Thank you for today," Layla said as she got out of the car. "It was the least I could do," James replied, not looking directly at her. "I'll make sure everything continues to go well." Layla watched him as he walked into the mansion, his posture always impeccable. But there was something different about him. Maybe the sound of the heartbeat had touched a part of James that he kept hidden. Or maybe it was just her imagination. In the following days, Layla began to notice small changes. James appeared more frequently in the common areas of the house, and their conversations, though brief, seemed less mechanical. He asked about the details of her appointments, how she was feeling, and even suggested activities to help her relax. One night, while they were dining in silence at the large dining table, James broke the habit and asked, "Have you thought about what you want to do after all this is over?" Layla was surprised by the question. It was the first time he had shown any interest in her future. "I don't have any plans," she replied honestly. "I still don't know what my life will be like after this." James nodded, seeming to consider her answer. "You'll have the resources to start over wherever you want. Just make sure you do something worthwhile." Layla looked at him, intrigued. Behind the calculated coldness, there seemed to be a trace of genuine concern. She didn't know how to interpret it, but for the first time she didn't feel completely alone in the mansion. One morning, Layla found a package left at the entrance of her room. It was a gift, wrapped impeccably, with a small, handwritten note. "To help with your free time." Inside was a new sketchbook and high-quality pencils. Layla was speechless. She didn't know that James knew about her love for drawing. During one of their early conversations, She had casually mentioned how she used to draw to distract herself, but she never expected him to remember, let alone care. That night, while she was in the garden, James passed by her and stopped for a moment. "Did you like the gift?" he asked casually. "Yes," Layla replied, holding the sketchbook. "Thank you. I didn't expect this." James shrugged. "It seemed like something that could be good for you." Layla smiled, holding the gift more firmly. "It was," she replied simply. Layla began to realize that the routine in the mansion, despite being well-planned and comfortable, was not enough to dispel the internal conflicts surrounding her. Each day brought a new sense of emptiness, as if she were physically present but disconnected from what was happening around her. While James maintained his usual firm demeanor, Layla felt there was something more to the man that he didn't let show. One morning, she was surprised by an unexpected request from James. He wanted them to talk after breakfast, something that seemed atypical, given the distance he usually maintained. Once they finished, Layla met him in the sitting room, where he waited next to a stack of papers. "I want to discuss some additional details of the contract," he said directly. Layla's heart tightened, imagining he was about to impose new conditions. "More details?" "I thought everything was already settled," she replied, trying to hide her tension. James watched her for a moment before continuing. "It's nothing that changes the terms. I just want to ensure you understand how things will be after the birth. I want to avoid any surprises." Layla took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I think I get it. I'll leave, and you'll go on with your life." He gave a small nod. "Yes, but I want you to know that if you need anything afterward, regardless of the agreement, I'll be available to help. I don't want you to feel abandoned." She raised an eyebrow, surprised by the offer. His tone was different, as if he was trying to show a consideration that hadn't been there before. "That's unexpected coming from you," she said, unable to hide her sarcasm. James just shrugged. "I don't want complications, and this is the best way to avoid them." Layla chuckled, but there was something about his seriousness that made her reconsider her sarcasm. Maybe he really was trying to be different, even if he didn't quite know how. Later that day, Layla decided to explore the mansion further. The place was immense, with seemingly endless hallways and rooms decorated with artwork that probably cost more than she could imagine. As she wandered, she came across a small study at the end of a hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and she peeked inside. James was sitting at the desk, but he didn't seem to be working. He was holding a framed photograph in his hands, staring at it. Layla couldn't make out the details of the image, but something about his posture caught her attention. It was the first time she'd seen him like this, vulnerable, lost in thought. She knocked softly on the door, and he quickly set the photograph back on the desk. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said hesitantly. James looked up, clearly surprised to see her. "It's nothing," he replied, returning to his neutral expression. "Did you need something?" "No, I was just exploring the house." Layla hesitated, feeling like she should say more. "You seemed like you were thinking about something important." James stayed silent for a moment before replying, "We all have things we'd rather keep to ourselves." Sensing he didn't want to continue that topic, she shifted the conversation. "This house is huge. Do you live here alone all the time?" He nodded, crossing his arms. "It's more practical than it seems. I don't like distractions, and here I have the space I need." Layla studied him for a moment, trying to understand how someone could live surrounded by so much luxury, and yet seem so lonely. "That must be strange," she said without much thought. "Having all this but no one to share it with." James looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm used to it. I don't need anyone to do what I do." Layla wanted to believe him, but something in his tone suggested otherwise. Before she could respond, James stood up. "If you need anything, Stephanie can help," he said, ending the conversation. That night, Layla went out to the mansion's terrace. The sky was clear, and the city lights twinkled in the distance. Sitting there, she let her mind wander. She thought about the sound of the baby's heartbeat she had heard during the checkup, a sound that had affected her in ways she couldn't explain. As much as she tried to maintain emotional distance, it was becoming harder. When she heard footsteps behind her, Layla turned and saw James. He looked tired, but he still carried that same rigid posture. "You like this spot, don't you?" he asked as he approached. "I like the silence," she replied. "It helps me think." He stopped beside her, gazing at the city lights for a moment before speaking. "Thinking isn't always a good thing." Layla laughed, but without much humor. "Try telling that to someone who spends most of their time alone." James didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. "Sometimes being surrounded by people doesn't help much either." Layla glanced at him, noticing a sadness in his words she hadn't heard before. "Maybe you need something you can't control, James," she said without filtering her thoughts. She didn't regret it. He frowned, as if he wanted to respond, but decided against it. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving Layla with her own thoughts. In the weeks that followed, Layla realized that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't maintain a solid barrier between herself and James. He remained enigmatic, but there were moments when small fragments of his true self seemed to slip through. And while she tried to keep her distance, something within her wanted to understand the man who had brought her into this world. At the same time, James found himself grappling with emotions he couldn't name. He had entered this agreement expecting simplicity and control, but now he was beginning to see that this was far more complex. Layla wasn't just part of a plan, and that scared him. The following week, it was time for another checkup. Layla woke up early, feeling a mix of anxiety and curiosity. The months were passing faster than she had imagined, and the idea of seeing the babies for the first time, even on a screen, made her heart race. She wondered if James would be there for this appointment, as he had been the last time. When she came down for breakfast, she found Stephanie going over the schedule with James. "Ready?" James asked, looking up from the folder of documents in front of him. "Ready enough," Layla replied, trying to sound calmer than she felt. "Great, we'll go together." He didn't give any more explanations, but his tone left no room for discussion. Layla headed to the car, feeling the silence between them heavier than usual. James, as always, was focused, but there was something different in his demeanor. Maybe he was as nervous as she was, though he would never admit it. At the doctor's office, the physician greeted them with a warm smile. He motioned for Layla to lie down while he prepared the ultrasound equipment. "Today, we'll get a clearer view of the baby," the doctor explained, adjusting the monitor. Layla looked at the screen, trying to ignore the cold gel the doctor was applying to her abdomen. When the transducer began to glide over her skin, she held her breath, anxious about what was to come. James, standing beside her, crossed his arms, keeping his eyes fixed on the monitor. Then, the sound came. The strong, steady rhythm of heartbeats, not just one, but two. "Well, here's the surprise we couldn't see last time," the doctor said, pointing to the screen. "You're expecting twins." Layla's eyes widened in surprise. Twins? She had never considered that possibility. She felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a mix of shock and joy. Instinctively, she placed a hand on her belly, trying to process the news. James, for his part, remained silent for a few seconds. His serious expression gave way to something Layla had never seen before: genuine awe. He leaned slightly forward, watching the screen intently. "Two?" he asked, as if needing confirmation. "Two," the doctor replied with a smile. "Both seem healthy and are growing well." The silence that followed was filled only with the sound of the heartbeats echoing in the room. For Layla, that moment was magical. No matter how hard she tried to remain emotionally distant, She couldn't help but feel connected to the two lives inside her. Twins! What a twist! Give us a like and comment your reaction to this big reveal. James, standing beside her, seemed equally moved. He remained quiet, but his eyes revealed something that words couldn't express. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable, touched by the idea of becoming a father to two. On the way back to the mansion, the silence between them was different. It wasn't the usual cold and distant silence, but something laden with meaning. Layla finally broke the silence. "You don't seem like the kind of person who gets easily surprised," she commented, trying to lighten the tension. James sighed, his eyes fixed on the road. "I'm not, but this," he paused, choosing his words. "This is different." Layla glanced at him, intrigued. James rarely showed emotions, but now he seemed lost in thought. "Is it scary?" she asked, almost in a whisper. He turned slightly to look at her before answering. "No, it's impressive, knowing that in a few months, two completely new beings will be here, depending on me." Layla felt a pang of pain in her chest. She knew that eventually she would have to let go of those babies, but hearing him talk about them with such care made her realize how connected she already was to them. "They also depend on me, at least for now," she said, trying to hide the emotion in her voice. James nodded. "I know, and that's why I want to make sure you're okay, Layla. Not just physically, but in every way. That's important to me." She stayed silent, absorbing his words. It was the first time he had spoken so sincerely about what they were going through together. Later that night, Layla was on the terrace, looking at the horizon, when James appeared again. He seemed hesitant, something rare in his usually confident demeanor. "I can't stop thinking about what the doctor said today," he began, sitting next to her. "Two babies, two futures." Layla turned to him, surprised by his openness. "It's a lot of responsibility, isn't it?" she asked. "It's more than that," James said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This is the first time I feel like something in my life can't be calculated. I can't plan who these two will become. I can't control who they'll grow into." Layla felt a chill hearing those words. It was rare for James to admit that something was beyond his control. She realized that, like her, he was changing, albeit reluctantly. "Sometimes that can be a good thing," she said. "Not knowing what's next. It can bring things you never imagined." James looked at her, as though he were considering her words for the first time. He seemed to be accepting the idea that not everything in life could be planned. In the following days, the news about the twins brought an unexpected lightness to the mansion. Stephanie began making adjustments to the nursery that had been prepared, now adapting it for two. Layla watched the transformations with mixed feelings. She knew the agreement required her to give up the babies, but deep down, she realized it would be far harder than she had imagined. As preparations continued, Layla and James started to see that the contract that had united them was turning into something far more complicated. The twins, not even born yet, were already reshaping their lives in ways neither of them had foreseen. The days following the revelation of the twins brought a subtle yet significant shift in Layla and James's dynamic. Though he remained the same methodical and reserved man, small gestures began to emerge, revealing a side of him Layla hadn't expected. One afternoon, after a medical appointment, James insisted on escorting her to the car, something he would typically leave to Stephanie or another staff member. "Are you okay?" he asked, holding the car door open for her. Layla nodded, surprised by the gesture. "Yes, I'm fine. Thank you." On the drive back to the mansion, their usual silence was broken when James asked, "Is there anything you need? Anything that might make you more comfortable?" Layla glanced at him, trying to read his expression. It didn't feel like a superficial concern. There was something more genuine about it, though she wasn't sure how to interpret it yet. "Nothing comes to mind right now, but thank you for asking," she replied cautiously. He nodded and returned his focus to the road, but Layla sensed that something was shifting. Despite her reservations, James seemed genuinely concerned about her. Back at the mansion, Layla noticed more signs of change. One day, she found a set of new pillows and blankets in her room, accompanied by a simple note: "To help you rest better." She couldn't help but smile at the gesture. It was a small act, but it carried meaning. Later, as she sipped tea in the living room, James entered and quietly sat in the armchair opposite her. He seemed more relaxed than usual, though he still maintained his serious demeanor. "Did you like what I left in your room?" he asked bluntly. "Yes, I did." "It was thoughtful of you," Layla replied, studying him curiously. "Good. I want to make sure you're comfortable. That's important to me," he said without looking away. Layla frowned slightly. As much as she appreciated the kindness, there was still a barrier of mistrust she couldn't quite overcome. "You're changing, James. Or at least it seems that way. But I still don't know why," she said directly. He stared at her for a moment, as if deciding what to say. Finally, he sighed. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I am changing. But the truth is, I don't know how to be different. I'm not used to caring." The words seemed to surprise him as much as they did her. It was rare to see James admit any vulnerability, but there he was, revealing a part of himself that always seemed locked away. That night, Layla reflected on the conversation while gazing at the sky from the terrace. James wasn't what she had expected. He was still hard to figure out, but there was something human beneath that controlling exterior. She just didn't know if that was a good or bad thing. James, meanwhile, was in his office, staring at the contract that defined his arrangement with Layla. For the first time, he felt the weight of that document. He had started this with a clear goal: to have an heir and move on with his life. But now, things weren't so simple. He knew he was starting to care, and that terrified him. The next morning, James joined Layla for breakfast, something he rarely did. "There's something I'd like to discuss," he said directly. Layla looked up, curious. "What is it?" He hesitated before answering. "I know you still don't trust me, and I can't blame you. I've never been good at trusting people, and that's turned me into someone who maybe isn't easy to deal with." Layla stayed silent, letting him continue. "I've had experiences that taught me not to depend on anyone, to not let anyone get close enough to hurt me. But with you, with what we're building, I realize that maybe I'm wrong." She blinked, surprised by his honesty. It was rare to hear James talk about himself this way. "We all have our barriers, James," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean we need to hide behind them forever." He nodded, seeming to consider her words. "Maybe you're right, but changing isn't easy for me." Layla gave a small smile. No one said it would be. Later that day, James decided to join her for a walk in the garden. They talked about trivial things at first, but the conversation soon returned to the babies. "Have you thought about names?" he asked, surprising her. "No, not yet. I thought that was something you'd want to decide on your own," she replied. "I think it would be fair to do it together," he said, to Layla's amazement. She realized that James was trying to be more open, more present, and while she was still cautious, she couldn't ignore that he was making an effort. As the sun set, they sat on a bench in the garden, watching the warm colors of the sky. "I never imagined I'd be here, doing something like this," Layla said, almost to herself. "Neither did I," James responded with a slight smile. "But maybe this is exactly where we need to be." Layla looked at him, noticing that, for the first time, James seemed to be letting his guard down. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance that this wasn't just a contract, but the beginning of something much bigger. Feeling the shift between them? Drop a like and tell us in the comments. Do you think James is changing for real? The morning started like any other. Layla felt the weight of the months of pregnancy in every movement, but she was determined to keep her routine. James, as usual, was in the office, buried in documents. Their interactions, now more frequent, had become a kind of silent comfort for both. But that day, something was different. Just before lunch, Layla felt a sudden pain. It was different from any discomfort she had felt before. She tried to ignore it, thinking it was just another typical pregnancy ache, but the intensity increased. Alarmed, she called Stephanie, who immediately realized the seriousness of the situation. "James needs to know about this," Stephanie said, helping Layla to sit down. "This could be the start of labor." Layla nodded, trying to control her breathing as another wave of pain hit her. Stephanie went to get James, who appeared in the room within minutes. Seeing her, his usually impassive face showed something rare, genuine concern. "Layla, what's happening?" he asked, quickly approaching. "I think it's happening," she said, gasping. "The babies are coming." For a moment, James seemed frozen, but he quickly regained control. He grabbed the phone, ordering the driver to get the car ready and instructing Stephanie to gather everything they would need for the hospital. "We're going now," he said, his voice firm but with a touch of urgency that Layla had never heard before. The ride to the hospital was a blur of emotions. Layla focused on managing the pain, while James, sitting next to her, watched her with a mix of anxiety and determination. He held her hand during the trip, a gesture that seemed automatic but was full of meaning. "We're almost there," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "You'll be okay. We'll be okay." Layla didn't respond, but she felt a strange calm from his words. At the hospital, everything happened quickly. A medical team was already on standby, thanks to James's meticulous planning, and Layla was taken straight to the delivery room. He stayed by her side the entire time, refusing to leave despite the staff's attempts to get him to wait outside. "I'm staying," he said firmly, holding Layla's hand. "I'm not going anywhere." During the hours that followed, James witnessed something he never imagined. Layla's strength as she brought the twins into the world. Each moment seemed endless, but also filled with an intensity he had never experienced. Finally, the first cry filled the room. The sound was both small and powerful, reverberating like a wave of emotion. "A boy," the doctor announced, smiling. "A beautiful, healthy boy." James felt his heart race. He couldn't take his eyes off the baby being carefully placed on a nearby table. Before he could fully process what was happening, a second cry filled the room. A girl, his daughter. Layla, exhausted but with eyes shining, looked at the two babies being gently cleaned and wrapped in blankets. She wanted to hold them, but she knew the moment would be brief. James stood frozen for a few seconds, watching the doctor's work. Then, as if something inside him had finally given way, he stepped closer to Layla, took her hand, and said, "You were incredible. Thank you." Silent tears streamed down Layla's face, but she couldn't tell if they were from joy, relief, or a heart already beginning to break. Soon after, the babies were handed to her. Layla held them carefully, feeling the warmth and fragility of their small lives. She studied them, taking in every detail, their closed eyes, tiny fingers moving involuntarily. It was an overwhelming love, and she knew it would be impossible to leave them without carrying a part of them forever. James stayed by her side, silent but visibly moved. When he finally held the boy in his arms, his hardened expression softened in a way Layla had never seen before. He seemed to connect with something far beyond the idea of an heir. It was life in its purest form, a bond he had never experienced. When he held the girl, James closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to imprint the moment into his memory. When he opened them, he looked at Layla, and she saw something she never expected: genuine gratitude. "They're perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Layla nodded, still holding the boy. Tears fell freely now, but she didn't care. That night, while Layla rested in her room, James stayed by the baby's side in the hospital observation area. He watched them sleep, feeling a flood of emotions he didn't know how to control. For the first time, he realized these children weren't just part of a plan or a legacy. They were his connection to something greater, something he had never allowed himself to feel before. True love. Stephanie arrived, carrying coffee. She placed the cup on a nearby table and gently asked, "Mr. Carter, is everything all right?" James looked at her, clearly struggling to find the right words. "For the first time in a long while, I think it is," he replied. Stephanie smiled and left, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his children. Meanwhile, Layla woke up in her room, feeling a heavy loneliness. As much as she wanted to be happy, she knew the contract still loomed over everything. The babies, now the center of her existence, wouldn't be hers for much longer. But when she looked at the door and saw James walking in with both babies in his arms, something inside her shifted. He looked different, as if that moment had transformed not just his relationship with the babies, but also with her. He approached the bed, handed her the boy, and sat beside her, holding the girl. "I don't know how, but this has changed everything," he confessed, looking at the twins. Layla nodded, knowing that no matter how difficult what came next would be, this moment was a miracle she would never forget. Months later, James's mansion was steeped in a heavy silence. Layla knew what the day meant. The weeks following the twins' birth had been a mix of joy and anguish. She loved them more than she ever thought possible. But the contract was clear. Her time there was coming to an end. Today was the day she was supposed to leave everything behind. As she packed her few belongings into a small suitcase, Layla glanced at the babies' cribs, where they still slept peacefully. Tears threatened to fall, but she refused to cry. She didn't want her last memories to be marked by weakness. She knew what she had signed and tried to convince herself it was the right thing to do. Stephanie knocked softly on the door, entering with a worried expression. "Is everything ready?" she asked quietly. Layla nodded, swallowing her emotions. "Yes. Thank you for everything, Stephanie." The assistant looked at her, hesitating before speaking. "Are you sure this is what you want? It seems like there's something more between you and Mr. Carter." Layla forced a smile, though her heart felt heavy. "It's not about what I want. It's about what was agreed upon." Stephanie didn't press further. She simply left the room, promising to let James know Layla was ready to leave. When she came down the stairs with her suitcase in hand, Layla found James waiting in the foyer. He was standing by the front door, his eyes fixed on her. There was no trace of the cold, calculating man she had met at the beginning. The James standing there seemed different, vulnerable, as if he was about to lose something important. "Everything's ready," Layla said, breaking the silence. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a step toward her, his gaze intense. "Are you really leaving?" he asked, his voice low, almost hoarse. Layla felt a lump in her throat but remained firm. "That was the deal. I've done my part. Now it's time to move on." James stood still for a moment, before reaching into the inside pocket of his coat and pulling out the contract. He held the document between his fingers, as if it was something insignificant. "This contract," he began, his voice steadier now, "should never have defined what's happening between us." Before Layla could respond, James tore the paper into pieces, letting them fall to the floor. The sound echoed through the foyer like a declaration. "I don't want you to go, Layla. I don't want this to end here." Layla froze, her eyes fixed on the pieces of paper on the floor. Her heart raced, but pain and fear kept her hesitant. "James, you can't just tear up a contract and expect that to change everything. It's not that simple." He took another step toward her, his expression full of emotion. "I know it's not simple. Nothing about this has been simple for me. But these past few months have shown me something I never had the courage to admit. I need you, Layla. Not just because of the twins, but because you brought something into my life that I didn't even know was missing." His words hit her hard, but she shook her head, trying to resist. "And how do I know this is real?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How can I trust that you won't change your mind? That you won't pull away when things get tough?" James took a deep breath, seeming to struggle with his own insecurities. "Because I've already tried living without feeling anything for anyone, and it left me empty. You showed me that I don't need to be afraid of connecting, of being human. And yes, it scares me, but I don't want to lose this. Lose you." Layla felt tears streaming down her face, but there was still a barrier she couldn't overcome. "I fell in love with you, James," she admitted, her voice choked with emotion. "But you don't understand how hard it is to trust someone again. I've spent my whole life being discarded, ignored. How can I believe you won't do the same?" James moved closer, now so near that she could feel his breath. "Because you changed everything for me. And I'm not the kind of man who says that lightly. I don't know how to prove it to you, Layla, but I'm willing to try every day for the rest of my life if you give me that chance." His words were like a blow to her defenses. Layla felt something inside her about to give way. She knew there were risks, but for the first time, she considered that maybe it was worth facing them. "What if it doesn't work out?" she asked, almost in a whisper. James took her hands, looking directly into her eyes. "Then we'll try again, and again if necessary. I won't give up on you, Layla. Never." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Layla felt her doubts begin to fade, replaced by something stronger. Hope. She looked at James, realizing that he was truly willing to let go of his control, his barriers, to be with her. Finally, she nodded, letting the tears fall freely. "Okay, I'll stay." James let out a sigh of relief and pulled her into a tight embrace. For the first time, Layla felt that this was where she was meant to be. Wow, what a moment. Like this story and comment below. Do you think Layla made the right choice? The day was just breaking at James's mansion. Layla woke to the soft sounds of the twins in the nursery next door. There was something different about that morning. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the weight of uncertainty or the tension of living under the terms of a contract. She had chosen to stay, and more importantly, James had chosen to open his heart, allowing them to build something together. Layla got up and went to the nursery. She found the two little ones awake, cooing softly as they moved in their cribs. She leaned over each of them, stroking their rosy cheeks and whispering words of affection. Before she could get lost in the moment, she heard footsteps behind her. It was James. He stood in the doorway, watching the scene with a slight smile. His eyes, which had always conveyed control and distance, were now softer, filled with something Layla could only describe as love. "Good morning," he said, stepping into the room and approaching the babies. "Good morning," Layla said, as James picked up the baby boy in his arms. He looked at the baby with a sparkle in his eyes. "I don't think I ever imagined this moment would feel so natural," he confessed, almost to himself. Layla smiled, watching him grow into his role as a father. There was something deeply fulfilling about seeing him so devoted to the twins. The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment. James, though inexperienced, made an effort to learn how to care for the babies, helping Layla whenever he could. He changed diapers, though he was a bit clumsy at first, gave bottles, and even sang lullabies, despite his gravelly voice not being the most melodic. For Layla, this dedication was proof that he was truly changing. One evening, as they sat on the couch with the twins sleeping in their cribs nearby, James turned to Layla. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his expression serious but calm. "What is it?" she asked, curious. He took a deep breath before continuing. "I want us to be a real family, not just because of the twins, but because I want you by my side forever." Layla was silent, taken aback by the intensity of his words. She knew their feelings for each other had grown, but hearing that confession was something she hadn't expected. "James," "This is a big step," she replied, trying to process the moment. "Are you sure?" He took her hands, looking deeply into her eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I know this won't be easy, and I know I made mistakes in the beginning, but I want to build something with you, something that's not based on contracts or obligations, but on love." His words were sincere, and Layla knew it. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded. "I want that too, James. Let's try." A few weeks later, an intimate ceremony was held in the mansion's gardens. Only a few close people were invited, including Stephanie and other staff members who had become an important part of their journey. The day was perfect, with the sun shining and a gentle breeze moving through the flowers that decorated the venue. Layla wore a simple yet elegant dress, while James looked sharp in a suit. The twins, dressed adorably, were in Stephanie's arms, who couldn't hide her tears of joy. When James and Layla exchanged vows, they both spoke from the heart. James promised to be the man she deserved, someone who would always stand by her, no matter what. Layla, in turn, promised to trust him and help him become the best version of himself. At the end of the ceremony, as they stood embracing each other while holding the twins, Stephanie remarked, "You make a beautiful family." And it was true. For the first time, James, Layla, and the babies were exactly where they were meant to be. After the ceremony, life continued with its challenges, but also with moments of joy. James and Layla worked together to create a warm, loving home for the twins. They learned to be parents, facing sleepless nights and constant demands with a mix of exhaustion and happiness. One night, as Layla was putting the babies to bed, James appeared at the bedroom door. He walked up to her and, without saying a word, wrapped her in a tight embrace. Layla rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat that had become so familiar. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said softly. "Thank you for showing me I could trust again," she replied. Months later, on a sunny afternoon, James and Layla were in the garden, watching the twins play on a soft mat in the grass. The baby's laughter filled the air, spreading pure, infectious joy. Layla turned to James, who was sitting beside her, and saw him smiling. "Are you happy?" she asked, genuinely curious. He looked at her, and then at the twins before answering. "I never thought I could be this happy. You've given me more than I ever knew I needed, Layla. A family, a purpose, love." Layla smiled, feeling a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. "And you've shown me that love can be built even through challenges. Thank you for that." As they leaned in for a gentle kiss, the twins began to babble something that sounded like Mama and Dada. James and Layla laughed, overwhelmed with emotion, and moved closer to the little ones, wrapping them in all the love they had. That moment, simple and unassuming, was proof they had found something real. The story of James Carter and Layla Parker is more than just a dramatic tale of a millionaire and a struggling artist. It's a raw, emotional journey that mirrors the complexities of life, trust, and transformation. As an American reader, I found myself drawn into their world, a place where ambition meets vulnerability, and where the pursuit of control clashes with the unpredictable beauty of human connection. James starts as a man who has it all: wealth, power, a mansion that screams success. Yet he's empty, chasing an heir like it's another business deal. Layla, on the other hand, is at rock bottom, sketching on a sidewalk, her life a stark contrast to James's polished existence. Their paths cross in a way that feels almost cinematic, but what unfolds is a deeply human story about choices, risks, and the courage to let go of the scripts we write for ourselves. It's a narrative that hits home because it reflects the American ethos of reinvention, the belief that no matter where you start, you can build something meaningful, if you're willing to take a chance. At first, James embodies the classic American archetype of the self-made man: driven, calculating, and laser-focused on his goals. He's got the corner office mindset, where every problem has a solution if you throw enough money or strategy at it. His offer to Layla, a cold, contractual arrangement to bear his child, feels like something out of a corporate playbook, devoid of emotion or messiness. But as the story unfolds, we see cracks in his armor. Hearing the twins' heartbeats, watching Layla's strength in the delivery room, and holding his babies for the first time, these moments strip away his need for control and reveal a man who's been running from his own heart. For me, this is a powerful reminder that no amount of success or planning can shield us from life's unexpected turns. In America, we're often taught to hustle, to grind, to map out every step of our future. But James's transformation shows that sometimes the greatest rewards come when we stop trying to dictate every outcome and let life surprise us. Layla's journey, meanwhile, resonates with anyone who's ever felt invisible or stuck. She's the underdog, the person society overlooks, yet she's got this quiet resilience that's so inspiring. Her hesitation to trust James makes sense. Who wouldn't be skeptical of a millionaire swooping in with a deal that sounds too good to be true? But her decision to sign the contract isn't just about survival. It's a leap of faith, a bet on herself that she can handle whatever comes next. That's a quintessentially American trait: grit mixed with hope. When she chooses to stay with James after he tears up the contract, it's not just about love. It's about reclaiming her agency, deciding that she's worth more than a paycheck or a signature on a dotted line. For me, Layla's arc teaches a vital lesson. Even when life knocks you down, you've got the power to rewrite your story, not by waiting for a savior, but by stepping up and defining your own worth. What strikes me most about their relationship is how it evolves from a transaction to a partnership. James and Layla start as opposites, him with his wealth and walls, her with her sketches and scars. But they end up meeting in the middle, building a family out of chaos. It's not a fairy tale. It's messy and real, with doubts and tears and moments of raw honesty. In American culture, we love a good redemption story, and this is one for the books. James learns to trade control for connection, while Layla learns to trust again, proving that growth isn't linear. It's a dance of steps forward and back. Their twins become the glue, but it's their willingness to confront their fears that seals the deal. This hits home in a society where we're often told to keep it together or fake it till you make it. Their story says the opposite. Real strength lies in vulnerability, in admitting you don't have all the answers, and leaning into the people who matter. Applying this to my own life, I see a clear takeaway. Don't let fear of the unknown stop you from taking risks that could change everything. James could have stuck to his plan, found another surrogate, and kept his heart locked away. Layla could have walked away with the money, safe but alone. Instead, they both chose the harder path, together. In my own world, that means saying yes to opportunities even when they scare me, like applying for that dream job or reaching out to someone I've lost touch with. It's about trusting that the discomfort of growth beats the stagnation of staying put. Living in the U.S., where the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality runs deep, I've realized it's not just about individual hustle. It's about building connections that lift you higher. James and Layla didn't succeed alone. They succeeded because they let each other in. Another lesson I'm taking to heart is the power of letting go. James's obsession with control mirrors how I sometimes cling to routines or plans, thinking they'll keep me safe. But life doesn't work that way. Jobs change, relationships shift, and surprises, like twins, throw everything off course. Watching James tear up that contract felt like a gut punch. It was him saying, "I'm done pretending I can script my happiness." For me, that's a call to loosen my grip on the wheel, to stop overthinking every decision and trust that the detours might lead somewhere better. Layla's choice to stay, despite her past betrayals, pushes me to give people a chance too. Trust isn't easy, especially when you've been burned. but it's the only way to break free from isolation and build something lasting. Ultimately, this story is a love letter to second chances, a concept Americans hold dear. James and Layla didn't get it right the first time, but they didn't give up. They fought for each other and the family they created, proving that it's never too late to pivot, to heal, to start over. In my life, that means not beating myself up over past mistakes, but using them as fuel to do better. It's about showing up day after day for the people and dreams that matter. James and Layla's journey reminds me that happiness isn't a straight line or a dollar amount. It's a messy, beautiful tangle of risks, trust, and love. And that's a lesson I'll carry forward, one step at a time. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey with James and Layla. It's a story that's got heart, twists, and some real-life lessons we can all take home. If you loved it as much as we did, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that'll keep you hooked. Drop a comment below. Tell us what you'd do in Layla's shoes, or how this story hit you. We read every single one, and can't wait to hear your thoughts. See you in the next video. Stay awesome, and we'll catch you soon.